Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is simple. You bring the sources, we bring the synthesis, cut straight through the complexity, extract the vital insight so you're instantly well informed. Today, we're tackling a really fascinating piece of ecological research. It kind of flips a common environmental idea on its head. We're diving into a paper called Urban Environments Promote Adaptation to Multiple Stressors. It's in Ecology Letters by Elizabeth Briski and her colleagues. And the core of it really is this paradox. We all know human activity, our cities, our pollution. It's hitting biodiversity hard globally. That's the story we hear. But if you look closely, some species aren't just, surviving in these heavily changed urban places. They seem to be actually thriving.
Exactly. And this research really challenges us to think about, well, the speed and the results of evolution when environments change so fast because of us. The main question they asked was, basically, are these aquatic populations living in really impacted, human-altered urban spots? Are they tougher, more tolerant, maybe more plastic, when facing multiple stressors at once, compared to populations from nearby protected areas?
Okay, more tolerant of plastic.
Yeah.
Can we unpack that a bit? Because phenotypic plasticity is a key term here, but it sounds academic.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
But simply put, phenotypic plasticity is just the ability of one organism, an individual, to change its traits or how it reacts to stress without actually changing its underlying genetic code. Think of it like flexibility. If it suddenly gets hot, you might change your behavior, maybe hide, or your body might adjust its metabolism to cope.
But you haven't instantly evolved thicker skin or anything permanent.
Right, you've flexed. High plasticity means an organism is good at flexing its survival traits to match a changing environment. So the researchers are asking, essentially, does city life force these aquatic species to become better flexors?
And this matters more and more, doesn't it? Because urbanization is just huge.
Immense. Over half the world lives in cities now, and that's projected to double, roughly, by 2050. These aren't just small changes. We're talking fundamentally altered habitats.
Especially for aquatic life in cities, harbors, canals.
Exactly. They become these cauldrons of stress. It's not just one thing hitting them. It's a whole mix. You get the urban heat island effect, so water temperatures are generally higher. Then there's pollution air, water, noise, light pollution too.
Plus physical changes.
Yeah, physical changes like fragmentation, building concrete walls instead of natural banks, heavy ship traffic, churning things up. Everything hits at once.
And the old thinking was that evolution's just too slow for this, too slow to cope with our rapid changes.
That's the paradigm that's really shifted. Recent work, including this paper, shows evolutionary changes can be surprisingly fast. We're talking detectable shifts, sometimes in just a couple of generations. These simultaneous, predictable urban changes, they actually make cities really valuable scientifically. They're like these high-pressure natural labs.
Perfect for testing how life copes when multiple stressors, things we worry about globally, like warming and pollution, all pile on together.
Precisely.
Okay, so how did they set up this ultimate stress test in the Baltic Sea? What creatures were involved?
They focused on the Kiel Fjord area in Germany. They used 3 native species, one mussel, Mytilus sp, the common blue mussel type, and 2 kinds of small shrimp-like crustaceans, gammarids, Gammarus locusta and G. salinus.
And the locations were key, right, to get that comparison between clean and impacted.
Absolutely crucial. They chose sites to represent a gradient of human impact. The control or protected site was Schleimunde. It's been a nature reserve since the 70s, chemically in good shape. That's the baseline.
Your pristine population.
Relatively speaking, yes. Then you have the human-altered sites. Downtown Kiel was the most extreme end.
How extreme?
Totally artificial. Concrete habitat, heavy ship traffic, lots of historical and current pollution. Think high heavy metals, copper, zinc, tin, lead. Really nasty stuff historically.
Okay, so that's the far end of the stress scale.
Right. And they had intermediate sites too, like the Kiel Canal and Falkenstein Beach, still impacted by shipping, tourism, but maybe less of that heavy metal legacy than downtown.
And that heavy metal point for downtown Kiel, you said we need to remember that.
Definitely. It becomes really important when we look at the results.
Yeah.
So with these populations from different sites, they ran what they call the widest series of stress experiments to date for these animals over 30 days in the lab. They took, say, mussels from the protected site and mussels from the impacted site and exposed them to the same stresses side by side.
And what were those stresses? You said cross stressors.
Yeah, meaning they tested combinations. 2 main sets. First, temperature combined with PCO2. That's the partial pressure of CO2 in water, basically simulating ocean acidification.
Okay.
Second set, temperature combined with salinity. And importantly, the the levels weren't just picked out of thin air.
They were realistic.
Yes, based on current conditions and, critically, future predicted values for the Baltic Sea, for temperature and PCO2,
Yeah.
and ecologically relevant salinity levels, too. So it was relevant stress, intense stress.
Right. So after running this 30-day gauntlet, comparing the city slickers to the reserve residents, what was the main takeaway?
The punchline was pretty clear, actually. Populations from those highly impacted urban sites typically did better.
Better.
Yeah, significantly more tolerant, maybe more plastic, across a whole range of conditions compared to the ones from the protected, cleaner site. City life, somehow, seemed to be breeding tougher individuals.
Wow. Okay. So for the mussels, the Mytilus.
We saw it very clearly there.
Mm-hmm.
The protected population, the ones from Schleimunde, they had consistently higher mortality rates in almost all the temperature-salinity combinations compared to the city mussels from Kiel.
So the pristine population was actually more fragile when pushed?
It seemed that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Brittle, you could say.
But hang on, this sounds almost too good to be true. Pollution makes super mussels. You mentioned an exception, didn't you? A point where this urban advantage failed.
Ah, yes. And this is crucial. It shows the limits. There was one specific condition: the absolute highest temperature combined with the absolute highest salinity.
Okay, the double whammy extreme.
Exactly. Under that specific extreme stress, the impacted population, the usually tougher city mussels, suddenly crashed. They experienced a significantly faster and sharper increase in mortality than the protected ones.
Whoa. So city life makes you tough for the everyday grind, maybe even future moderate changes, but it makes you more brittle at the absolute edge. When things go really, really bad, the adapted population collapses even faster.
That's what it suggests. It also says adaptation gives you a buffer, maybe raises your general tolerance level, but it doesn't let you defy fundamental physical limits. And maybe there's a trade-off. You gain broader tolerance for moderate stress, but perhaps lose some resilience at the very, very extreme end. The decline is steeper when you hit that wall.
Fascinating. And did you see similar things with the gammarids, the little shrimp things?
Similar patterns, yes. For Gemmarus locusta, in the temperature PCO2 test, so warming and acidification simulation,
Yeah.
it was generally the protected population that showed higher mortality, especially under the highest CO2 conditions. Again, the urban population seemed better equipped to handle those specific climate-related stressors.
So this pattern of urban toughness holds up, but you mentioned they sampled one species, G. salinus, across 4 sites. That allowed for a closer look.
Exactly. That species gave them the chance to look beyond just protected versus impacted. They could look for a finer gradient of response related to how impacted each site was.
Mapping resistance against the intensity of the stress.
Precisely. And the discovery there really hammered home the point about intensity. The population from the single most impacted site,
Downtown Kiel, with the heavy metals and concrete.
that's the one. That population was the star performer. It had significantly lower death rates overall. It was the most robust population they tested, across all the species.
So the place that, to our eyes, looks the most degraded, the most hostile,
Yeah.
is producing the hardiest organisms. It implies a direct link. The tougher the conditions, the stronger the selection pressure, the more resistant the population becomes.
It really points that way. Resistance seems continuous, not just on-off. It scales with the intensity of the stressors. Proximity to the city, to industry, seems key.
And it suggests that maybe the constant battle against those heavy metals and other pollutants in downtown Kiel is what drove this really strong adaptation. And that resistance then gave them a kind of cross-tolerance, made them accidentally good at handling high temperatures or low pH, too.
That's a very strong hypothesis coming out of this. The pollutants they weren't directly testing in these specific experiments might be the underlying drivers of the resistance to the things they were testing. Cross-tolerance.
Okay, let's quickly touch on that mobility difference again. Mussels versus gammarids.
Right. Mussels, once they settle as larvae, they're stuck. Filter feeders, fixed in place, they have to take whatever the environment throws at them. Adapt or die, basically.
Whereas the gammarids,
They're mobile. They feed on decaying matter. They can move around. They can potentially find little pockets, microrefugia, maybe behind a rock where the current's slower, or a spot with slightly cooler water when stress peaks.
does that difference matter for adaptation?
The authors think it might. They suggest it's a key area for future research. Does being literally locked into a highly polluted spot like the mussels in downtown Kiel force an even faster, stronger adaptation compared to a mobile species that can perhaps buffer the worst of it by moving? That's a good question.
So, stepping back now, What are the bigger implications here? You mentioned these urban sites acting like time machines.
Yeah, it's a powerful concept. Because these urban environments are often warmer, maybe have higher CO2 locally, definitely higher pollution, they kind of mimic on a small scale what the wider world might face under future global change.
So studying how life copes there now gives us clues about future adaptation potential everywhere else.
Exactly. Valuable insights into the genetic toolkit species might have to draw on globally.
Which leads to a potentially really positive application, genetic rescue.
Right. If these urban populations are so tough, so resistant to multiple stressors, maybe they hold the key. Their genes, their resilience, could potentially be used to boost the fitness of endangered populations or species that are struggling in other, perhaps less challenging but still changing environments.
It sounds like a huge conservation opportunity, using city dwellers to save their country cousins almost.
It's definitely the potential silver lining. And this is a huge, but we have to talk about the major ecological risk that comes with it. It's called the anthropogenically induced adaptation to invade hypothesis, or AIAI for short.
Anthropogenically
Yeah.
induced. Adaptation to invade. Okay, that sounds ominous. Adaptation making things more likely to invade. How?
Well, the idea is that the very process of adapting to these human-altered habitats, like ports and cities within their home range,
Yeah.
actually makes them much better invaders if they get transported somewhere else. The traits that make them robust back home, that high plasticity, the tolerance to multiple stresses like temperature swings, pollution,
Mm-hmm.
those same traits also make them more likely to survive the journey. Think about transport and ballast water, for example. It's stressful.
Right. Lots of shocks.
And crucially, most long-distance transport happens between ports, between urbanized areas. So an urban-adapted organism is already prepped for the journey and likely finds a similarly altered, suitable environment when it arrives. Less need to adapt all over again.
So we're potentially selecting for super survivors in our cities, and then our global trade network efficiently ships them to other cities where they can easily set up shop.
That's the concern. We might be unintentionally creating and distributing ideal invasive species.
Wow. Okay, so this genetic rescue idea, while promising, it comes with a massive health warning. Translocating these super tough urban populations could backfire spectacularly by unleashing new invasions.
Exactly. Caution is definitely needed. The potential benefits are weighed against a very significant potential risk.
Okay, let's be thorough. What limitations did the authors themselves point out?
Well, they acknowledge the study focused primarily on temperature, salinity, and PCO2 as the stressors in the lab experiments.
Right, even though the field sites had other stuff going on, like the heavy metals.
Correct. So future work really needs to explicitly test the effects of those other urban factors, noise, light, and definitely the heavy metals themselves, especially given the results from downtown Kiel.
Although, as we discussed, cross-tolerance might be part of the story already.
It might be, but demonstrating it directly would be stronger. They also noted that the lab tests used acute stress, like a sudden shock.
Yeah, you turn up the heat instantly.
Right. Whereas in nature, change is often more gradual. So future studies could look at gradual acclimatization. Does that change the outcome? Does it allow even the protected populations to cope better if they have time to adjust?
That makes sense. And also maybe look at how they handle variable conditions. Not just constant high stress, but the ups and downs common in urban ports.
Yes, assessing resistance to environmental variability over time is another key next step. Real-world conditions fluctuate a lot.
So wrapping this up for you, the listener, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive?
I think it's that city life, counterintuitively perhaps, seems to be a powerful engine for rapid adaptation in some aquatic species. It's forging populations that are remarkably tough, resistant to a wide mix of stressors, many linked to global change.
But this toughness comes with that big potential trade-off, the increased risk of becoming invasive elsewhere.
Precisely. Adaptation isn't always purely good. It has ecological consequences.
Which leaves us with a really provocative final thought, doesn't it? If the most polluted, most impacted sites are producing the most resilient populations, how should that make us think about conservation? Our traditional focus is often on protecting pristine areas, but are we inadvertently focusing on protecting the populations that might actually be the least equipped to handle the future changes we know are coming?
It certainly complicates the picture. Are we protecting the most vulnerable or the least resilient? It forces a rethink about what resilience means and where we might find it in this rapidly changing world.
A complex question indeed, something for you to consider long after this deep dive ends.